Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, another session in our Legal Technology webinar series scheduled for Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Hella Schwartz-Grossman, Marketing Manager at Worldox. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded and the link will be emailed to you afterwards. Everyone is muted, but if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the GoToWebinar questions pane, and we'll address any questions at the end of the webinar. Today's session is a roundtable discussion on the importance of training, and we are joined by several of our Inner Circle VARs, and I'm pleased to introduce our panelists. Frank Jones. Frank is the founder and president of Legal Software Connection. Legal software has served law firms, legal departments, financial and accounting professionals for over 30 years. They will soon be celebrating their 30th year as a Worldox consulting company. They also sell and support software that is complementary to Worldox, including CompareDocs, CleanDocs, PDF Docs, and Symphony OCR. Andy Johnson. Andy has over 35 years of software training experience in law firms and other professional settings. She has worked for Legal Software Connection for 22 years, and as the Director of Training and Support, she's responsible for coordinating and conducting Worldox and other software training for all of Legal Software's customers. Sandy also provides high-level technical support services, and this creates a unique skill set when interacting with Legal Software's customers. Rick Bernauer. Rick has worked in the technology field for over 35 years. He's a recognized authority and speaker on law office technology, including practice management, billing systems, and document management. He is president of SciTech Corporation and consults with law firms and corporate legal departments in the Midwest on technology issues. John Heckman. John has been working with Worldox for over 25 years. He founded Heckman Consulting in 1997, and in the last 15 years has focused mainly on Worldox. His book, Worldox in 1 Hour for Lawyers, was published by the American Bar Association and is currently in its 3rd edition. He has been a member of World Software Consultants Advisory Board, the Inner Circle, since its inception in 2013. Bill Baker. Bill is founder and CEO of Baker and Cadence Solutions that specializes in technology solutions for law firms and corporate legal departments, primarily in the Western states and Western Canada. Baker Cadence Solutions has been a reseller of Worldox for over 20 years. Bill has the primary responsibility of sales and marketing and customer relations for his company. Peter Brannigan. Peter is driven by the desire to empower both firms and individuals with knowledge. Peter has focused on designing, implementing, and supporting Worldox solutions for many years. Building effective Worldox solutions and training people to use them well is what provides him with the greatest professional satisfaction. John Rock. John has been working with Worldox for close to 18 years. In that time, he has presented, designed, installed, and trained hundreds of Worldox clients. His strength is understanding Worldox from the end user's perspective and training users how to be familiar, comfortable, and productive with Worldox. His passion is setting up Worldox to be as simple as it can be so that firms do not have to think too much about it. Worldox just works for them. He enjoys follow-up training and site reviews showing firms how to maximize Worldox software and the new features as they are introduced. And our moderator today is Rebecca Satin. Rebecca is Chief Information Officer of World Software Corporation and part of the ALT Founding Circle. She has more than 25 years of experience in law firm technology and has spoken on topics such as cybersecurity, design thinking, collaboration, and deployment planning at bar associations, ILTA, Legal Tech, and other technology forums. Thank you in advance for the attention you'll be giving this webinar today. And Rebecca, handing it over to you.
Thanks, Hella. It looks like we might have lost Rick, so hopefully he can get reconnected. Um, Anyway, before we get started, training is one of the most important components of a successful implementation of any new software application. Using software efficiently requires understanding its features so they can be leveraged to enhance productivity. With the pandemic, this has only made the need for training more apparent, with many people working remotely who have never done that before. And I'm really happy to welcome this group of resellers. I think collectively, between everyone here, we have well over 100 years of experience working with Worldox. So the first topic that we want to discuss, there are a lot of different times that you might bring somebody in for training, but I wanted to talk about specifically which circumstances might require that you consider bringing in people to do some additional training. There are a lot of different situations, if there are new features to implement, there are upgrades and all sorts of things like that. But initially, one of the things that sometimes happens is we've seen situations where firms have merged or even a new lawyer joins a firm and conversion is involved. And Frank, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about those situations.
Well, thank you. And I am impressed and honored by the group we have assembled today. My calculator ran out of digits when we were hearing all those years together. Sandy, who works with me, and I think everything we know about Worldox, we've learned from customers. We only know what they've taught us. What we've learned during taking on sites that are converting from another system, I think early on we learned that just because they might already understand document management doesn't mean that they understand Worldox. And in many cases, Worldox is more feature-rich and functional. So what we've learned over the years in conversion sites is to not only tackle the technical side of making certain the records match from one system to the other, but also not getting too connected to how things used to be done. Because just because you did something this way before doesn't necessarily make it the right way to do it. So Rebecca, I'm not sure, what more we should talk about with conversion, but I think everybody needs training, conversion or otherwise, and I think they need to take it on, on an ongoing basis. And at some point, I'll share a story in this conversation today that Sandy and I learned in Chicago one day at a law firm, and I'll save that for a little bit later.
All right. I look forward to that. So another situation where it's definitely very important to bring in people to do some training is if you're implementing an upgrade. And Peter, I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So there's no doubt that if people are doing an upgrade, they probably had the product for a while. So a couple of things happen. One is you've had new people that joined the firm since they went live that maybe never got trained or only got trained by a peer who maybe doesn't know the product as well. So it's a time to catch up and level set everybody again. And not only that, but you can slip in some knowledge that may be looking like it's part of the upgrade, but it's things they should have known from day one or maybe didn't really comprehend at the start. And you sort of slip it in as it's part of the upgrade process, but actually it's something that was around. For example, there used to be tags. Most people didn't know about tags. We show them filters and they go, wow, that's a great thing in this new upgrade, filters. Meanwhile, it's been around there for 5-10 years, whatever it's been, and people didn't know about it. So you can kind of use that as a catch up, both for features that people weren't aware of. The new features is obvious, but also level setting. The old people that had some training, but not follow-on training, as well as new employees, and get them all to the same level. So it's a unique opportunity to level set everybody. And the return on that investment is huge for the company in terms of efficiency and happiness with the product.
Yeah, definitely. When back when we could travel, I was always surprised when I would visit Worldox sites and I would find that they really wanted to, they wanted an enhancement request, and they'd ask me for whatever the enhancement was, and it turns out it was something that we could already do. So there's definitely a lot more to Worldox than people think. John, do you have anything to add about upgrades? John Rock?
Well, typically on the upgrades, and especially when we do a GX4 upgrade, I've got a list of probably 20 topics that I want to show them. And I go through from a save perspective, show them the differences in the profile card that have been, that are new features in GX4. And then I show them find, then I show them search, and then I show them the Outlook changes that have happened. And just to have a checklist with like 20 different items so that as you're going through, you can show them those new features. And as Peter said, that always leads to rabbit trails and other new things that may have already been there, but they didn't know they existed. And that increases their knowledge, their familiarity, their comfortableness with the product, and makes them even more productive than they were.
Thanks, John. So another situation that I think is a great time to bring people in to do some training, even when people do an upgrade, especially with GX4, if they upgrade to GX4 or even if they update to a more current version of code, we've had so many new features that have come out more recently that a lot of times they might upgrade or update and wait to roll out certain features. Like, for example, Worldox Web came out with one of the updates to GX4, as did our email agent. We have an Outlook Web add-in. Even if somebody has never, you've had GX4 for a while, or you've had Worldox for a while, but maybe you haven't used something like workspaces. These are also great times to bring somebody in. Frank, do you have anything to add about that?
You want me to tell you my story?
Sure, we'd love to hear your story.
20 years ago, approximately, Sandy and I show up at a law firm in Chicago, mid-sized law firm, and we're in their big conference room. And the firm administrator is talking to us, and we're trying to arrange a training curriculum. You know, this is like the Sunday of the day before they go live. And we're going through all these details and all these plans of how we're going to teach. And she stopped me in middle sentence and said, "Frank, you obviously don't understand something." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, what am I missing?" And she said, "Frank, people don't learn things. They only know things based upon rote memory." And at that moment, it forever changed our view of training. And we've time tested this forever. So ask your folks, do they know how things really work? Or do they just know if they hit this button, something happens, but they don't know why? And why that's so important is we have to dig a little bit deeper as we educate and explain to them, not that you do this and this happens, but why does this happen? And therefore, if you can teach that and grow their thinking a bit, they may understand, why does favorite files work? Why does it always work, even if the indexer might not be running at a moment in time? Why does direct access always work? What's the difference between them and finds? So in a way, you have to take for granted that people don't necessarily instinctively want to learn this way. But if we don't feed them and get them to think a bit more, they'll never be more than rote memory. And therefore, if those few features change their behavior, they're stuck because it no longer does what that button used to do.
Yep.
Yep, I'm definitely one of those people who, I guess my curious nature always has me asking why something does what it does. But understanding why helps you remember. So.
And aren't those the most fun people, guys, and everyone else to teach? The ones that ask the most, all of a sudden the training is so an exciting situation because they want to know more, they want to get deeper into it. That's what we're trying to develop a culture of. In our case, we call that feature aware. We don't know that we can teach people, but we're trying to make them feature aware and have that little bag of tricks that one day maybe they want to pull out that feature they were made aware of in a lunch and learn class or something like that.
Sandy, I see you nodding. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, just that is so true. When people finally figure out that why favorites work or direct access, etc., then, like you said, Rebecca, they remember it because now they really realize that. And also the thought that they might not remember every single feature, but they get the concept. And then they can pull it out later. And if they think, well, I don't remember quite how to do that, let's call Sandy or call Frank or any of the other folks here and, get that straightened out.
Great.
Which is also why you need good documentation that maybe you want to talk about later, Rebecca. But
Yes,
I think all of us as resellers provide quality documentation and other video and other forms. And I think that's a really good way to backfill these training sessions that may be provided that they can turn to on a moment's notice and look something up.
Yep. Rick, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to say that our approach to training that we've done is often building on the basic knowledge and then trying to add to that. And I often use the analogy of learning software is like assembling a jigsaw puzzle, and you've got all these pieces, but you don't have anything to hook them onto until perhaps somebody has helped lay out those straight edge lines or some section that you can start to attach your knowledge to. So when we organize our training, we try to give the basic information. Here's how you save, and then build on that. Here's another thing you can do with saving that you could use perhaps a quick profile to make that easier to do it, or use the favorite matters feature to make it quicker to be able to do the saving. And until somebody understands that concept, like Frank was mentioning, it's hard for them to pin something to it. So when we approach training, it's to give them the concept and then show them how to build on that and get something else. And that comes back to repeat follow-up training, because people are going to forget half of what they learned in the initial session. But if you can review with them later, then it'll be able to stick with them more and they can add to it.
That's actually a great segue into the next question that I had, which was about bringing people in to do refresher training. And actually, John Heckman, I think you had a few things to say about that.
Yeah, and it ties into what people said before. I think the refresher training has several functions. It does a level up, as Peter said. It shows people new features. And also, and perhaps equally important, it lets end users ask their questions, respond to things that they've wanted to know for a while, and generally give them a sense that their input is useful and valued. And one of the things I always do when I'm approaching a refresher class is to corral the office manager or Worldox administrator or whoever it is at the firm and say, could you canvass your users and find out what questions they have and what annoys them about Worldox and what they like about it, and then use that as a basis for the refresher training. That gives me a step up in preparing answers, and it also, again, reinforces the feeling that that their input is really needed and valued.
That's a great approach.
Tying into what some of the other people said, I think more generally, the job of a consultant is to show people the best way to accomplish what they want to accomplish, which very often is not the way they think they want to accomplish it. They think they want to have something that's glorified Windows folders. And that's not the best way to do it. And if you can show them and explain, like Frank said, why this works like this and why using an index is better than scrolling down 16,000 directories, one for each matter, then you have a much better chance of letting it sink in.
Thank you, John. Bill, I think your team does a lot of refresher training too, don't they?
Yeah, we do an awful lot of it, Rebecca, and we can tell by the support calls as to whether people are getting or understand the features in Worldox. And so when we get those kinds of calls and talk to the people, I usually will go to the firm administrator or the managing partner in some cases and suggest a lunch and learn curriculum of classes, about 30 minutes or so on Worldox features. And we do that over 3-4 weeks, and it seems to really help. And it enables the new people who have come to the firm to get caught up, or at least on those features. And it gives the rest of the firm a chance to renew what they might have learned in the original. The other thing I want to point out and add to what the others said is as a part of our training, when we did the on-site training before COVID, we would have walk-around support after training, desk side support by users so that we could tell whether they got it or not. Could they do the basic functions to do their job? So now we try to do the same thing, but it's all remote. But we'll remote into a person's workstation, have a conversation, and have them demonstrate to us some of the capabilities that we just taught them in the class, so that we know that they got it. Because it's very hard with COVID now to be able to tell whether anybody actually learned it, and can go back and use it.
Yes, definitely. And that actually is the perfect segue into my next slide here. Basically, because of COVID, so many things have changed in the last year. Floor support, I think, is the biggest thing. Like, there's a lot of training that could have been done before, remotely, but floor support is something that that's a huge change from last year to this year that all of you and all of your teams have had to adjust to. Frank, how has your team in particular adjusted to the change since COVID, with everybody working from home?
Wow. Video is really, really significant, isn't it? So most of us have been using web-based support for a long time. And tech support is tech support, and it's easily done through the internet, of course. But just the introduction of cameras and the expectation now that everybody can see one another has changed everything. So to me, at this point, I think we're equally as effective as we used to be in person because of video. What we've also learned is that people are now comfortable with it. They understand what it means. They know how to mute themselves or others. And thus, this has actually become a great, difficult period of time, but I think we've all grown a lot from it. And I think we've been busier than ever, actually.
Great.
We've done, Rebecca, on this is I noticed that the class sizes are larger. When we did on-site training, we had smaller groups because we wanted more dialogue. Now we have larger groups attending the remote training, and then we deal with them as individuals after the training.
Ah, interesting. I think, Peter, you had mentioned when we first talked about this that your team has approached it a little differently than that.
Well, the great thing is that people are used to Zoom and these things from their families, and they're now tech savvy. So whereas before you had to be there, now you don't have to be there anymore. It's totally acceptable. In fact, we can monitor, if I've got a Zoom session with 8 people on it, I can tell who's paying attention very rapidly. So it's just almost as if being in a room. So there are certain circumstances which we will do bigger classes, but we do like the smaller ones more to give people the interaction where they can ask questions right there and interact right there. But you can also monitor. People think, well, people are goofing off if you do it remotely. That was the old thing. But now that people are on camera, they can't really goof off anymore. Everybody can see it, so they actually pay more attention, and you can tell, and you can, draw attention to, not draw attention to somebody, but maybe ask a question that gets them re-engaged again if you see them drifting. So we do still keep the classes smaller, but it is good to know that we can actually go to a broader audience, and not just in one room, but actually now we've got a global reach, because now we do one-on-one training in ways that we never really could do it before, because people had to have you local, whereas now it could be anywhere in the world at this stage. We have 3 continents where we've done deployments, and now we're kind of a global training thing, one-on-one or small groups. So, but I do like the smaller groups, but I do see the place of the large groups where it makes sense.
Yeah, actually, and that's a lot of times I think it depends on the firm culture as to whether the larger groups or the smaller groups work better. But it sounds like between all of you, you've got a handle on both of those situations.
Well, and
Yeah,
I would
And I
like
think,
to add one thing to that. I think most of us, we find that we often separate the attorneys in separate groups, only because they honestly do have different needs, mobile needs differently perhaps than others.
One other thing I've noticed that when we were doing on site, many times the senior partners would not attend the training, too busy or whatever, and they had their assistants help them with it later. But now that they're not in the office and they're working from home, they need assistance, or they need Worldox training. So we've been being called saying, hey, I need to learn this again. Can you give us a session? And we've been doing that for senior partners.
actually, Bill, I think you gave an example when we were discussing this, the planning of this webinar, something to do with a new car. Is that ringing a bell?
Yeah, I'm always, when you get a new car, as I just recently did, there's so much technology in cars today that you can't learn them all. It's the same with Worldox. And so you learn to do the basic searches and how to find documents, how to make a document, etc. But there are so many other features that are in my car that it's the same in Worldox. And it's going to take time for me to use them and learn them, and therefore, use them every day. And so I'm learning each week. I find a new feature that I can use and go forward. It's the same thing with the Worldox product. It's so feature rich that you can't learn it all at one time.
Well, I think like with the car example, if you have heated seats, you might not learn how to use them if you buy the car in the summer, but come winter time, once you need the feature, you're going to want to learn how to use it.
Right. Or navigation, talking to the car
Yeah.
to tell you where to go, and then finding that it does do all that. It's amazing.
So Peter, I think you also mentioned in our planning sessions that because of the remote situation, costs are often less as well.
Yeah, there's definitely circumstances, because my typical sort of once day or 2 day a week was to go into Manhattan, which is about 40 minutes on the commuter bus, or an hour and a half on a slow thing. But it's a long enough travel each way, and people felt you had to be there. Whereas once this is hit, we save a lot of money for people, because we used to charge one-way travel, that we would eat half and they would pay for half, because they can't, spend a half a day going to the city to do 1 hour of work. That's just not productive. But now we can hop on and off sessions with people one-on-one, and it's actually a lot cheaper for them, and they can get more people. So what we're finding is that they will do the new hire just joining the company now, rather than just waiting until you can get to the city or get on the schedule. Now they can just say, I got somebody starting tomorrow. Can you squeeze them in? And they'll just come more often, and it's a lot cheaper for them. And they're getting the return right away on day one of that person starting. Within 1 day of starting, they're now effective, instead of having them, tread water for a week or two till we get everything sorted out and get the training set up. So I think they save money, and it's more efficient, and people should avail of this opportunity.
That's great.
Rebecca, if I can jump in on that for a minute.
Sure.
One of my favorite things to push is talking about return on investment, which is sort of impolite because you're not supposed to talk about money, but The fact is, if you can do even a halfway decent training, and each of your users saves 6 minutes a day, which is not a lot. That's 30 minutes a week. That's 25 hours a year. Multiply that by how many ever users you are. You have 20 or 50 or whatever, and you're talking about 500, 1,000 hours a year, and then multiply that by your billable hours, and you're talking about not a small amount of money. And no matter how you cut those numbers, the return on investment on training is massive. And people don't think about it because they just don't think about it, but it's something that firms ought to think about.
Definitely. Doing things more efficiently allows them to do more work for more clients. So in the meantime, I think people are probably curious about what types of training you offer and whether you've customized it to the firm. So John Rock, I wonder if you could speak to that.
You know, when we all got our lockdown back in March, Peter and I had many calls and discussions. And what we did was we took everything that we did in conference rooms from his agenda and my agenda. We combined the two together. We took the best of both worlds. And that's when we developed our online academy training course. And that has been very effective for us because in addition to our remote training that we can do one-on-one and with other groups, we now have another offering that we can give them. And I'll let Peter talk about that a little bit more.
Well, I see Rick has guitars behind him. When I was learning the guitar, I used to sit for an hour, 2 hours practicing. And my buddy that was teaching me said, don't do that. Sit for 10 minutes 5 times a day. Don't do one long session. And a training is a bit like that, where you can only take so much that first hour and a half that we do go live or even a refresher. They can only absorb so much. So what we wanted to do was plant all the seeds, but then have all the videos behind that they can go back to forever and pick and choose, as somebody said, as you said, the warm seat in the winter. You know, when you get to that thing that you're doing in your job function, that you need something like a project, or you need categories, or you need whatever it is, now you can go back and watch the training class, the little video of 3-5 minutes, targeted, and you're more open to absorb it because you're motivated to learn that because you need it to do something at that time. It's time, appropriate. So that's what we've really done is we've gone to these training courses for the web, for Academy, and even for Teams that's coming out soon. We've got a whole course in that people can do as well. So we think a combination. And then John Heckman's book too, by the way, I've always left that with clients as well in his cheat sheet. Again, a way for people to come back. I tell them to use it in the bathroom. I said, take it in the bathroom. I hope you don't mind, John. But I tell them, put the cheat sheet in the bathroom, just randomly go to stuff and pick out little nuggets. And
just read it, don't use it.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, that actually makes me wonder whether for the rest of you, John Heckman, Rick Bernauer, Frank and Sandy and Bill, whether since everybody seems to be doing a lot of remote training, via Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever, do your clients ask whether you can record that training, and is that something that you do for them?
Yes, I often get requests. Sandy, do you mind if we record this? And my response is always, if you remind me to hit the record button, we can record it.
That's great. That's very useful.
Yes.
When we do our training with a particular firm, because we're often trying to use their documents, their system to really be able to show it, we will record the training, but we have the agreement with them that it's for their own in-office use, only for their firm. And it's a good plus for them. That way they can have other people use it to review later on or be able to refer back to it.
So on that topic, actually, go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say the same thing, that we'll allow recording for a firm only because of the privacy of the documents, just as Rick pointed out. But we've also transitioned to using the Worldox Academy that the Docs Advisors people have developed, that John and Peter have put together, and using that in combination with the remote training, so they can follow the videos first and then do the training one-on-one or in group.
And do you each customize the training for the firm?
We do. Yeah, we
do.
will put together a curriculum and then have the approval of the administrator or the managing partner, whatever the firm, and then deliver it in classes by topic.
Okay. And
can I add a comment on top of that, Rebecca?
Sure.
I think Sandy, in particular, in our company in the last year and a half or so, she's done a lot of work to promote question and answer based classes. In other words, no real topics up front. And then the skill is to try to get the people involved up front to be aware that, yes, we do want you to talk. And once they start talking amongst themselves, I think Sandy would agree that that's some of the best classes we ever see.
Yes.
Yep.
The one thing that I was just going to say, one thing that frustrated isn't quite the word, but when someone will, call and they'll think it's a technical issue and they'll be like, well, I can't get Worldox to blah, blah, blah. And I show them how to do it. Well, I never knew that. And I just wish people would, at that point, pick up the phone or email or say, because it can do so much more. And they get frustrated when it can't do what they want it to do, when really it probably can.
Yep.
I think the refrain from the refresher training that picks up on that I get, and I assume everybody else has always gotten, is, wow, I never knew you could do that. Or it's something that's simple and that's been there for years, and
Yep.
they either were never trained or forgot or whatever. So, wow,
Yep.
I never knew you could do that. That's the motto of our refresher training.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rick, did you have something to add?
Well, the thing I wanted to mention there are different types of training. We talked about the refresher or online, different parts, but if we're doing them through a web-based type session or in the office, we found that sometimes it's good and people want to say, okay, we'll have the support staff in one group, the paralegals in another, and the attorneys in another, because that way they're kind of more comfortable and we fashion it that way. But we also recommend that the firm consider doing it by practice groups or getting together, because the training is then not only about a feature in Worldox, but it's a process that the firm uses, and they can talk with each other and go, okay, let's do this, let's work that through. And it helps their intercommunication with each other to develop those procedures.
That's a great point, because litigators do things very differently from, say,
Absolutely.
corporate lawyers.
Or the real estate group, very different.
Yeah.
And I think the training on the firm's data is critical to all this, because especially if you can sit with them in advance and say, okay, give me a sample litigation client or a sample real estate client, and then do that actual data where people are familiar with the client, the retention rate is just dramatically higher.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point, too. So the next thing that I wanted to discuss was documentation. And I know, at Worldox, we produce our own documentation, but I also know that every Worldox site is fairly unique in terms of how they have Worldox set up. So do you customize documentation for your firms? Let's start with you, John Heckman.
Well, I have not really. I have cheat sheets and a frequently asked question documentation. And of course, they practically have to buy my book. But sometimes I'll do documentation for particular features or new functions, or for example, for various firms, I have a boilerplate for creating new clients and matters that I'll then take that and customize it for the people that are allowed to do that for the firm. So my major documentation is, in fact, not customized, but I do a lot of individual, smaller scale documentation on particular features that is customized for the firm.
Okay, and Frank and Sandy, I think the two of you do a little bit more with customization.
Well, Sandy, I'm going to let you answer this because you've written it all for all these years, okay? But I would say that we brainstormed, Sandy and I, about there are foundation features. And therefore, she took the idea, Sandy, and what is the guide called?
Foundation features of Worldox GX4. And it generally goes as a reference to the training. So, you know, it's a little old school. It's still, you know, a manual, but it's a PDF that can be searchable, so it doesn't have to be printed. But in my early years of training, which it has changed, people wanted paper. You had to have a piece of paper. So we started with the documentation a long time ago, and now it's expected. Do you have documentation for the next version? And try to it's a lot of pictures, which people tend to acclimate better to. And it follows the way that Frank installs Worldox, so it's very familiar to them.
Great.
I can add to
Before
that.
we, yes, sure, Bill.
We have two handouts. One is for the initial training and then another one for the second training, which we call the advanced training. But each of those are customized with screenshots from the firm's Worldox system, so that they see the same things that they'll be seeing in the classes. And because these handouts have gotten really large, we don't print them any longer, as Sandy said. We now just put them as a bookmark on their Worldox system, and then they can just click on the bookmark, and we make that as part of the installation, so they're easy to get to.
That's a great idea. Keep it all handy.
Yeah,
so
all the firms that I train for, I just routinely put a bookmark that's called GX4 Help, that I put my documentation and various firm manuals or stuff that they ought to help. I say, here's a one-click access to answer all your questions.
I do mine a little differently.
Part of our training and implementation too is that we'll take all the GX4 guides that are produced by Worldox, and I think there's 4 or 5 right now. We save them into every new implementation and every upgrade, and we bookmark those for all users as well. And we train them that whatever it is you're looking for, open that, text search it, find your answer, and that saves us from having to print them out, and they're readily available to all users at all times.
that's a great idea too. So when we were putting this webinar together, we also decided that with all this Worldox talent all in one place, in one webinar, in one virtual place, we wanted to ask each of you whether you had a specific Worldox tip to offer our audience. So I think I will start with Frank.
Okay, we'll call this what do we call this, Rebecca? Workspaces with one-click views. You know, that might be a cool name.
Yeah.
You know, great software is developed by good programmers, right? But it's created because end users come up with great ideas. And we had a customer in Toronto who had used another system and said, you know, we really wish that in Worldox we could choose which matters we want to subscribe to and have always visible in our interface. And then more importantly, we want to be able to immediately click on a button or many buttons within that interface and get the documents we're looking for. I listened carefully to that person and talked to the developers at Worldox, and they invented this. So what that screenshot is these are pre-designed. So they're done by the administrator at a firm. And those are one clicks that automatically exist to every matter you subscribe to. And when you click on those, they return those types of documents as defined by what those labels say. Now, obviously, it's using the intelligence of Worldox and the different metadata, the doc types, the categories that have been used, collecting them all together to bring those into groups easily. And this makes, for lawyers in particular, this is what they want. One click, they have it, move on to the next matter or the next phone call.
That's a great feature, Frank. And even though I've seen it before, I haven't seen a lot of firms that have made use of that. So I'm hoping that those firms are watching and are interested. So Sandy, I hope I did this justice, but you came up with the next idea.
Yes. What a lot of users don't realize, and it may be because some are still the old school, if you find a document and you say, oh, this is a great document, this is exactly what I need, but of course it has been finalized, but you want to use it. So they open it and they mean to hit save as and save as a new file, but they get interrupted, they turn around, they make their changes and hit save. You have saved over someone else's document. So what I try to get people to do is, okay, you find that document, don't open it, copy it. And I had just went through the process of how to do it. And you fill in, save it as a new document. And the best thing is number 6 there, do you want to open the new file, your file? Not the original, but the one that if you screw it up, you're screwing up your own file and not someone else's.
That is a feature. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that from my 25 years of working in law firms, that feature in itself would have saved a lot of people a lot of time.
Yes.
A lot of restores from backups.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the next feature that we have for you is presented by John Heckman.
Okay, when I show people, and this works well, especially in smaller firms, if they take the little search field in the upper right corner of the screen and change it so that it searches the description or the contents, they can type anything in there and they'll get the searches, they'll get the results. And as people probably know, when you do a text search in Worldox, you get these little Google-like snippets that show you how many hits there are. And you can click on the little blue down arrow and go through the hits. And also, if you open up the document in the viewer, it will go straight to that hit. So if you have something, a provision or an easement in real estate or whatever that shows up on page 27 of a very long document, the viewer, if you've done a text search, will go right to that hit on page 27. And people love it.
I like how in your example you use the word Boolean.
I needed to find something with a lot of hits.
Yes. Okay, and next up we have a feature from Peter Brannigan.
Yeah, so this one that I happened across one day after using Worldox for years, and maybe I missed it in the training classes I did, but called open file location, and it sounds a bit innocuous, but you can actually, after a search, let's say you search for your last 20 Word documents or your favorite files, and you see something recent, often you want to see other files in that matter. So you can either right-click and do open file location, but even more useful, if you put the button at the top just by right-clicking in a blank space at the top of the screen, you'll find the file open file location button, and you just put it right up there. So you basically click on the last 20 Word documents, find the document, hit that button, it'll navigate right into the folder and the matter that that you're looking for without having to do a lot of typing and a lot of searching. Because we try and get people to search less and do a couple of clicks is much more effective for people to get around. And there's two buttons here that's the same thing. The default is open file location, but we usually rename that to the custom text that you can do in any button, and we just call it open matter. That's more intuitive for people. Again, just to make it a little bit easier for people and save vitamins in their eyes at the end of the day, so that they're not as exhausted. So it could be open project, open matter, open whatever, open file, whatever makes sense. But yeah, very productive, very effective.
Thanks, Peter. That was one that I don't think I ever noticed it until you pointed it out during our discussion about this webinar. But it's very similar to a feature that I have talked about when I've met with Worldox customers, which is the feature that's in the Worldox ribbon, same matter, which allows you to open up the list of files that are in the matter for the document that you have open on the screen. So both very useful, but this was a new one for me. So thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
And John Rock, I think you brought this one to us.
You know, and it's not like it's a hidden gem here, but I find that the one, I call it speed bump in Worldox, is saving documents. And if I can show people how to do two things, save documents faster and find documents faster, I think we're ahead of the game. And favorite matters is a feature that came out with GX4 that I absolutely love. And once I show folks how on the save profile card, you can click on that left tab called favorite matters and pre-fill in the client and matter. Now all you have to do is add the description and potentially the doc type, and you click OK, and the document is saved. So it greatly saves time at the file save perspective. And the favorite matters tracks where you've saved documents to recently. So because we're creatures of habits and we work in our active matters, it's typically going to have most of your active matters listed there. From a find perspective, when you open the Worldox file list window under the search dialog there, if you click on the left tab again on the navigation panel and click favorite matters, you can double click a matter in that list and immediately get to all the documents in that matter. And it's one of the fastest ways that you can get to your active matters and all documents there. And I've found that a lot of folks don't know that that's there. Once you show them that, it kind of revolutionizes how quickly they can save and find documents for active matters.
Yes, I definitely, when I first joined World Software, I had worked at a Worldox firm, but we had GX3, and so I hadn't seen GX4 yet, and this was one of my favorite things when I first saw GX4 was favorite matters. So thank you, John. So next up, I think Rick wanted to talk to us about categories and bookmarks.
Categories is a feature in GX4 that some people just kind of skip over because you don't need to use it, but it's so handy. When you save a document, you can tag it either as a personal, a public, or a folder type category, and then you can later search for those. So if you're not familiar with that, certainly go out and look up. But one of the keys to it is when you're doing searches, you might need to customize your search template to add that category field, because especially some places that have been upgraded from GX3, that field may not appear. And you do that on a search screen by going down, clicking on that options button and selecting customize fields. And then a screen comes up that lets you add in that category field so you can search by it later. But the real thing I wanted to show was to combine that kind of a search. Once you've done it, you could search for all the documents that you've tagged, perhaps documents, in a category that I still need to review, or documents for the, upcoming litigation group staff meeting, something like that. And you could tag those documents, but you can make it easier for yourself and other people to find it by then doing that search for all the documents in a category and then saving it as a bookmark. Once that list comes up on the screen, go to your bookmarks or press Control D and then save it as a bookmark, like documents that I need to get a signature on, if that's the category. And then on your bookmark list in Worldox, you'll just have a single button. And when you click it, you see all the documents flagged as being in that category. Real time saver.
That's actually a great suggestion. And I like how you combined two features for that tip. So Bill, your favorite feature, which is also one of mine, is projects. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I like to. This is saving the best for the last here. Projects is something that just makes everybody accept Worldox when you're transitioning from a Windows folders environment to the Worldox environment. Because the reason that the Windows folders environment gets out of hand is because people make all kinds of subfolders. And they do it in order to be able to easily find documents. And so with projects in Worldox, you simply can make a project, take documents, and drag them to the project. But you're not really dragging the actual document. You're making a link back to the original document. So then you can have a virtual subfolder, and then you can put whatever documents you want to see there. That folder can be saved under the client matter, and so you see all of your documents together. I had a firm in Vancouver where one of the senior attorneys loved to have all of her precedents together. And she started to actually tear up when she couldn't find her precedents when we switched to Worldox. But all we had to do was make project folders for her, and she could find them all. They're all there. And then she could move those project folders also to different clients and matters. So it made life easier for her when she understood how to use them. This project feature is something that everybody should be using, and if they use it, makes life easy.
Definitely. Yes, and I like the way that you can actually add unrelated files that are like, ultimately, if you can search for the stuff, then you can bookmark it. But with a project, it doesn't have to be files that are related enough that they'll come up in the same search result. You can just put them all in the same project and still be able to find them.
Yeah, and they could be any place within Worldox as long as they're a profile document. The other thing I forgot to mention was you can do it from workspaces or you can do it from the file list. I'm finding that doing it from the workspaces is now actually easier for people to learn and understand, because all you have to do is right click and say, I want to make a project, give it a name, and then start dragging documents or links to that project.
Yes, definitely much easier than in previous versions. So I think we're nearing the hour mark here, and I don't want to keep anybody if they have to go. But I wanted to at least provide everybody with contact information for all of our resellers and see whether if anybody has any questions for the group, feel free to submit them through the questions interface. I think we have a few people that want to be in touch with some of you about some of the materials that you've mentioned during this session. But let's see if we have any other questions.
Yeah,
Ella?
we have somebody asking if they can get copies of some of the documentation that everybody mentioned they have available. We have Sylvia wants a copy of Sandy's PDF on GX4. We'll put you guys in touch with each other, and you can make arrangements for that.
And if we don't have any other questions, I just want to really thank all of you for joining us today, because I've even learned a lot about all the different types of training that you offer, and I've even learned some things about some features. So thanks to all of you for joining us today. If anybody has, I think we have run a little bit over, so if we do have any questions that come in after the fact, we can put everybody in touch and answer those questions later. And I will turn this back over to Hella.
Okay, all right. I also would like to thank everybody for participating in this valuable discussion on training and for all the tips you provided. We are going to post a recording of this webinar, so anyone who could not attend today, they can see it. But to all of you who did attend, thank you so much. And if you have additional questions, please contact us. We hope that everyone will join us again for another presentation. We have them scheduled on Friday, and keep an eye out for postings. You can check our website for additional sessions. And so thank you again, and all the panel, thank you so much. And we hope to see everybody again soon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.